You think Jesus can do anything right here in Las Vegas, Sin City? I believe that what God is doing is He's creating an eternal testimony. And what we know is when we can come together under a spirit of unity, nothing will be impossible. Hello and welcome to another episode of Las Vegas United. I am your host, Aaron Pino. And here at Las Vegas United, for those of you, maybe you're watching us for the first time on Keen 17, or maybe you're watching on YouTube or listening on iTunes or Spotify, what we do here at Las Vegas United is we are partnering together with God to create eternal testimonies of His goodness, mercy, and power right here in our city of Las Vegas. I'm so grateful because we're able to connect with different ministries, people of influence, community leaders, and today is no different because I have a good friend on the show who's really making a difference not only in Las Vegas, but now around the country, and really cool things happen. I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him talk about that. But would you help me welcome today my friend, Dan Klatt. Dan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm grateful to have you on. And just for the record, if anyone's never told you before, you have the voice for a podcast, man. Your voice is nice and deep. It's robust. I love it, man. It's very nice. So,
Thanks.
Yeah, welcome to the show. So as we're getting started today, we're going to talk about everything that you're doing with your life, your business, how you're helping churches across the nation. But before we get into that, let our audience know a little bit more about yourself. How long have you been in Las Vegas? How long have you known the Lord? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I came to Las Vegas through my parents. My dad was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in 1953, and I was born out at the base hospital in 1955. So I kind of grew up here and really never left. As a teenager, I tried to leave a couple times, just for a few months each time, but I came back home.
Oh yeah, I left whenever I was 18, and then I came back whenever I was in my 30s. So I understand. You know what I mean? You can't stray for forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
The city calls you back. That's awesome. So you grew up here in Las Vegas. So you know the city very well. You knew the city before any of this was developed. We're
Right.
towards the southwest part of Vegas where there was nothing beyond, what do they say? Rainbow, you know what I mean? And
Right.
Here we are today. So with you being here in Las Vegas, tell us a little bit more about your story too, how you came to know the Lord.
Well, I was raised going to church on occasion, like a lot of people are. We were kind of the twice-a-year club type of thing. So I had a soft spot for the Lord because of just that limited exposure. So I had a basic here, and when I was 8 years old, I went forward on an altar call for that church, and it was meaningful to me. It wasn't just, no one else was there, no one else went down front, no one else went to the altar call. It was something that the Lord touched me, and it was meaningful to me, even though I was only like 8 years old.
That's awesome.
I kind of held on to that belief, but I got into drugs as a kid, recreational drugs, and anyway, because of drugs, I reached out to the Lord, and He healed me of my drug problem.
Amen.
And that was in 1976.
Wow.
And at that time, I was a custom auto painter. I did custom paint jobs in different shops around Las Vegas.
Okay.
And but 3 months after I got saved, the Lord gave me my own little shop. And we named it Glorified Bodies, and we had it on Boulder Highway there for 26 years.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then one of my employees that had worked for me for 8 years bought it and changed the name to Sudden Impact Auto Body. And that's what the name is today.
Okay.
But that's what I started in 76.
Okay.
And over that period of time, I got to know a number of pastors, about 125 pastors or so that I had come to know personally through fixing their cars, their kids' cars, family, and going to, back in the 70s, it was the end of the Jesus movement when I got saved.
Oh, yeah.
And there were 2 or 3 concerts a week in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
that we had a choice to go to, and they were all free back then. So I was on fire for the Lord, and I went to all those concerts, and I met a lot of young people that were friends back there, are pastors today that I serve.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So you
number
grew up
of
with them
Yep.
before they became pastors.
Before they were.
And for the record, you know my pastor here in Las Vegas, David Childers.
I do.
He texted me not too long ago, and he said, "Hey, I'm sitting here with Dan Klatt. We're having lunch, and we're talking about you." I said, "All right, thanks, Pastor Dave."
Yeah.
So you've been around the city for a long time. You know a lot of the pastors.
Pastor David's dad used to teach a Bible study in my house once a week.
Wow.
In 1980.
Wow. Yeah, Pastor David's dad, Paul Childers, started a couple churches here in Las Vegas. One, which was Spring Valley Assembly of God, which is now Peaceway Christian Center. And then the other one now is what's known as the Champion Center. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, the Childers family, I'm really grateful for them. They've been staples here in the Valley for
Amen.
decades. I mean, we were talking earlier, we were talking about young churches and older churches, and you said, there's a lot more younger churches than there are older churches here in Vegas. And the Childers pioneered some of the older churches that are
Correct.
here, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful because that's part of my heritage here in Las Vegas. So, wow, I didn't know you started the auto body shop or the painting shop. I know exactly right around that area where that is. I didn't know that you started that you were down there. Man, Dan, you really do have some roots here in Vegas, man. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So you were in the painting, the auto body stuff. Tell us what you do now and how you got into what you're doing now.
Well, I left the auto body industry as a result of a back injury and a bunch of back surgeries, and it was hard to be bending over, and even in management, there's a lot of physical movement. So I left the industry and I went to become a business broker, because at one time we had 27 locations in 5 states with our shop. And so I went to be a business broker because I didn't know what else to do, and I didn't like it at all. You got a real estate license for it, and I really disliked it. I didn't like working with the others that were selling or buying the businesses. And so I made the decision to get out of real estate. And as soon as I did that, within about 24, 48 hours, I got a call from my own pastor. And he said, "The board has decided to sell our church properties, and you can list them for us, can't you?"
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "Well, yeah, I can. And I thought, this is a project I can do for my church while I'm looking for another career. That was in my head. And so I had the time. I was in real estate. I wasn't snowed under. I wasn't seasoned. I'd had my license for about 5 months.
Wow.
And so the first thing I needed to do was value the property. How much is it worth? I asked the pastor, how much do we want to sell it for? And he said, "Isn't that your job to figure out?" I said, "Okay." So I went to other professionals that I had met in my 5 months and asked people about, how do I value a church? And everybody said, "We don't know. They don't come along very often. We get by the best we can." I went to appraisers, and they said the same thing. We don't really have a system. We have to really kind of get into it, and we either have to do an appraisal or not. We can't really tell you how to, what kind of mechanism to use. And so there was no help. But I had built body shops, and so I knew what that cost to build. And so I applied what I knew from the body shops, because God's always getting you ready for tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
right?
wow. Come on, man. Go ahead.
So I applied that to building a church, and then I had to tweak it to fit a church, not a body shop, so that it was appropriate. And it was a system, it was a mathematical system, and I could apply it to any church building, and it would give a fair evaluation. So I did that to those 2 buildings. It was 2 properties. And the appraisers showed up, and they both said the same thing. How did you come up with a value for this building? And I said, funny you should ask that question, because I talked to people like you, and I couldn't get any help, so this is what I did.
Wow.
And so I told them about building body shops, and I applied this method to these properties. And both of them asked me for my notes. And so the appraisals came back right on the dollar.
Wow.
So I was like, there's nobody in this town that knows anything about doing churches. This is what I discovered through, about 10 months of selling those 2 properties. And after the second closing, the Lord spoke to me in the parking lot, leaving that second closing. And he said, where does the church go for real estate services if they need them in Las Vegas?
Wow.
And I said, well, I guess it's me.
And how long ago was that?
20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's I didn't know that's how you started it. And isn't that so funny? You asked for help. You didn't get any help. And then the help you asked came and helped you for help. Mm-hmm. Oh, of course, that's kind of how life goes. You know what I mean? The student becomes the teacher, and then the teachers become the student. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's some kind of biblical principle in there, but I like what you said. God's always getting you ready today for tomorrow, or however you said it. I think that's really awesome. So you get into this real estate field, and now for the last 20 years plus, you've helped the Valley. And so what does that look like whenever a church comes to you and they say, Dan, we're in a space right now, but we don't know what to do. We're wanting to get our own facility, maybe lease a property, maybe buy a property. What does that look like? Or before we actually answer that, how did people start coming to you and asking for your services?
Well, I had that list of 125 pastors, which I thought was a big list.
Oh, yeah.
The list of Las Vegas pastors we have now is just under 1,100.
Wow.
And I thought 125 was a lot, so.
Yeah. Wow. So you had that list of 125. You start helping people
I let them all
out.
know what I wanted to do, that I was going to specialize in churches.
Wow.
And business just trickled in a little at a time, mm-hmm. Little chore here, little thing here, and slowly built it up.
Yeah, and now you're like full blast. I mean, I love it on your shirt, the Church Guy Network, because you really are the church guy. I mean, everybody that I've talked to, whenever we were looking for facilities for our church, we launched our church 3 years ago. We'll be celebrating, I think, 4 years in February. We started subleasing from another church on a Sunday night. We got into a high school, and we were saying, man, we're ready to move some things around. But even before I called you this last time, I remember coming into Las Vegas, starting a church. I'm green, you know what I mean? I've only been on staff at churches before. I've never been the main guy. So I'm learning constantly, and so I'm like, we need to rent a 15,000 square foot facility because this, that, and the other, and so I start asking around people in Vegas, and like, you need to reach out to Dan. You're like, hey, and we messaged a couple times, and you said, well, when do you start, or what does the church finances look like? We have nothing right now. Okay, well. Yeah, God starts everybody someplace, and so you kind of taught me along, and then you talked me down from some cliffs, like, hey, Sparky, maybe you don't need 15,000 square feet starting off, you know what I mean? But whenever we started here looking for facilities for our own, everybody I talked to, I mean, everybody from David Childers to Andrew Walker to John Bohr, I mean, all these different pastors, they all said, do you know Dan Klatt? Do you know Dan Klatt? Have you heard about the church guy? And so that's how I first got accustomed to you. And so you really are the church guy here in Vegas. So talk to us about how you help pastors now. Obviously, you told us the story how you how you got into this, but now it's developed a little bit, and now you don't only list properties, you help churches get into properties. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So what we do is we help prepare, like you said. I was preparing you for your next steps and talking you down from some cliffs. It's through it,
which I'm so grateful for, by the way.
Yeah, and that's an orientation meeting we took you through. We take every pastor through that same orientation meeting because it adjusts everybody's expectations. You can't help but come in with false expectations because you don't. If you've never bought a church before, or if you haven't done it a half a dozen times, you're still going to learn on every one.
Oh yeah,
they're all different. So we do that orientation meeting to adjust expectations and slow people down a little bit because the market is not favorable to churches.
Sure.
The real estate market, the developers that have developed properties and the architects or whatever have never really, they built church appropriate properties when they're asked to. But most other properties just don't fit really well except for the office product. Office buildings fit the best. They require the fewer walls moved when we convert. And the shared parking is a lot easier with office neighbors because we're worshiping nights and weekends, and they're Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Sure.
And so we hardly see each other.
Yeah.
The church hardly even knows they have a neighbor. And the same for those businesses, the dentists, the lawyers, and doctors, and so on. So it's a great marriage. So we target office product the best. When it's leasing, there's a preconception with a lot of landlords that churches could be trouble. So we have landlord rejection is a big part of what we experience, and we try and make sure that everybody understands that up front. That we can pick out a really nice space, but that we have to have an agreeable landlord.
Yeah.
We have some cover letters and some things that we give to landlords that we submit a package to, so that he realizes that the security on his property is going to increase because the churches are around nights and weekends, keeping it more secure. And a lot of them don't realize that. A lot of them don't realize the parking advantage. We just loosened up parking for all of the rest of your tenants by being a church here, because there's a certain allocation for all of the square foot that anybody leases. And so it's just a good marriage, and a lot of landlords just don't think that deep into it.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we try and help them realize that you can have a really good tenant that can be a great neighbor for your other tenants.
Yeah. It's awesome. I know you're working with us on a couple different things, which we appreciate that here at Overflow Church. Right here, I'm the lead pastor of Overflow Church here in Vegas. If you're looking for a church, Overflow Church. There you go. Right.
Amen.
I can do that because it's my show. So, but what's really amazing. I talked earlier about talking me off the cliff. I don't want people to think like you're not a faith guy, because you are a faith guy. So it's not like you're saying, well, God can only move in these parameters, because, we've talked about some stuff, and you're like, God can do some things beyond what you're seeing here. This is the very practicals, nuts and bolts, very basic, if God doesn't move on your behalf. But you always have the inclusion and the ability, because the Holy Spirit and God is working really with churches. So for those people who are watching, I don't want you to think that Dan's only like this, only in a box. But the nuts and bolts, because you've done this a bunch of times, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times.
And the reason that dynamic happens is that pastors have a vision for tomorrow, but you only have today's money.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to find that balance.
Yeah. What's hilarious is whenever I first reached out to him, like, I want this how many square feet? Like, how many people in your congregation? Well, it's my wife and my 2 kids. You know what I mean? And so, it's like, okay, well, that's amazing. God's going to do work in your life and in your family and in your church. But let's rein some things in here. I know you're a man of faith, but let's think practically as you were moving out in faith too. So I really appreciate that about you as well. So you help the churches. You get them. I love the onboarding process. It's seamless and painless. It does help pastors who are maybe used to doing everything in the moment, boom, 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 actually take a step back and prayerfully consider their next moves. Because I was that way, I'm like, Dan, we got to do this right now. I got to do this right now. Amen, Aaron. I'm on board with you, but let's just slow down a little bit. There was times where I'm emailing you back and forth like, oh man, this is great. Just remember, this is a process. Mm-hmm. You're going to be in this thing for several years. It's not just 1 year at a time. This is something that's going to help the longevity of your congregation and really our city. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that about you. So you've been helping churches here in Vegas. That's going really well. You've helped a ton of my friends here in Las Vegas. You've helped a ton of pastors that aren't in my, I haven't met them yet. But as you're being faithful with what God has put in your hand, He's seen that you are faithful for more. So what does that look like?
Well, about 2 years ago, I joined EXP Commercial. And they have a different business model than other real estate companies that sell franchises in different areas. We have one broker for the entire globe. Everybody works for the same guy.
Okay. Wow.
And so we have no borders, and so we're able to work across state lines and internationally. We're in 23 countries so far.
Wow.
But when I came into the country or into the company, the company just got very excited about having someone that was a church expert, because there's only a few of us in the country. And so they rolled out the red carpet for us and did a lot of PR for us, just non-paid advertising, calling us out in crowds from the platform, announcing that we specialize in churches across the country and so on. So that expanded from basically a one-man show.
Wow.
Now that we have six of us on board in our lead team. And
that's incredible, man. That's awesome.
And we have about 130 agents across the country now. And I didn't have anything, 2 years ago. We've started a new project that we're very excited about, and we're taking churches' property that they have excess property. So there are a number of churches across the country that have acreage around their property that was never developed, never turned into a parking lot or whatever, and it's grassy or woodlands or something like that. We have secured a plan on how to convert that extra property and turn the property into a community. And a community that highlights the church as being the centerpiece of that community. And it will be set up so that the church is really reaching out into the community also. For instance, if we discover that there's not a podiatrist for 35 miles, we're going to try and put a podiatrist in that property, along with the senior housing that we're going to develop. And some of it might be veterans housing, or handicapped housing of different types of natures. I know my own pastor wants to build a gymnasium and wrap it in apartment buildings for veterans.
Yes.
And so we're real excited about that. We went from, this was just an idea 6 months ago, and the Lord dropped it on the hearts of individuals from all over the country that did not know each other, but somebody knew me, and so they all came to us with this idea. And then as the whole idea of developing these communities came across, we had the Lord really smiled on us on getting a couple large funds, investment funds that are willing to support the whole deal.
Wow.
And so we'll partner up with churches. We'll increase their cash flow. We'll increase their footprint on the community that they're in. which will increase their membership.
This is awesome.
So it's just a win-win-win.
Yeah.
It's just so awesome.
What I love about you, Dan, is you are very much a kingdom guy, right? And so your heart is for the local church, and that has expanded now to really transforming the landscape of cities. With the kingdom of heaven, it's more than just, which you understand this, expanding the kingdom of heaven is more than just having amazing services on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night and growing your congregation.
Amen.
It's actually changing the landscape of a community. So you bring in different things that serve a community, like the housing for veterans or homeless shelters or a podiatrist, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And causing the landscape of a community to be blessed because of the church, and then the church to be blessed because of the community that's surrounded in. And that's kingdom. And that's the
Amen.
kingdom of heaven. And the way that you have stewarded what God has placed in your hands so well by serving us here in Las Vegas so faithfully. Now God's like, all right, Dan, I'm going to open up the entire country to you. And what was once a one-man band is now, I'm going to give you hundreds, a couple hundred, like over 100 people to work with you. And now you're going in and really changing the landscape of the country through real estate and strategic partnerships.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It is awesome. And I want to encourage people who are watching, maybe church members or ministers, it's so much bigger than just having a church service on a Sunday or a Wednesday night. It's how can we partner together practically and strategically to change a city. We have about 2 minutes left. Give me a 30-second blurb on what you think about what I just said right now. And then after that, I want you to let people know if they want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'll tell you what I've always said since the beginning. It is an honor to work with the finest people in town every day. I get to work with all of the church boards and the pastors of all the churches every day of the week. What an honor.
Yeah.
And so I am blessed, and every one of our meetings, even if it's just a short telephone meeting, is an uplifting, and it's challenging and fun and super rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. What is the best way if somebody's watching, maybe a pastor or a board member of a church, and they want to get in contact with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is dan@churchguy.net. Email me at dan@churchguy.net. Telephone, you could be delayed a little bit because I have telephone management because my phone rings so much.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer of a curve. You'll get answers faster through email because I have support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Answering my emails for me.
Absolutely. We'll have that on the screen. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really
thank you.
Grateful to have you on,
invitation.
And then also, you're absolutely welcome. And thank you so much for serving not only our communities, our churches, but also the kingdom so well, man. I'm grateful for you. I'm glad I know you.
And for what you do on the show.
Absolutely.
This is awesome.
Thank you. And listen, I want to take a moment to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch this. Again, maybe you're watching on King 17, listening on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're getting this. We just want to say thanks. We appreciate you being a part of our community here at Las Vegas United. So you know what? We will see you next time right here on Las Vegas United. God bless you.